We've reached the final chapter of Marcus's story, the high-functioning pattern. This describes a person maintaining flawless external performance while deteriorating internally. This pattern isn't unique to alcohol. It maps identically across almost every dependency covered in this training. To his employer, Marcus looks like a model employee. He logs on-time deliveries, generates zero complaints, and maintains a clean safety record. That perfect record is what makes this pattern so deceiving. The workplace metrics we rely on to flag a problem are almost always the very last indicators to shift. When we wait for performance to drop, we create an illusion of control. We end up completely blind to the threat growing right beneath the surface. Look past the flawless exterior, and Marcus's actual day-to-day experience is a slow accumulation of adjustments. It takes increasing effort just to feel normal. This graphic illustrates how his cognitive capacity is increasingly spent on logistics. He constantly calculates supply, timing, and concealment. On nights he doesn't drink, this hidden mental load generates persistent anxiety, layering perfectly over his baseline occupational stress. None of this effort shows up on a performance review. It exists as an entirely private, ongoing negotiation Marcus is having with himself. Because these early neuroadaptations happen strictly inside the brain, they stay invisible to everyone else: his dispatcher, his doctor, and his wife. If Marcus possesses the internal awareness that something is wrong, why hasn't he asked for help? Out of 100 people with a diagnosable substance use disorder, 94 go without treatment, leaving fewer than 1 in 10 getting help. When asked why, people report not recognizing the severity, cost, lack of access, and up to 40% cite societal stigma. But there is a specific psychological barrier at play here, called self-stigma. This is when an individual internalizes society's negative assumptions, concluding that asking for help is an admission of weakness. This produces the "why try" effect. A person decides there is no point in reaching out because the problem feels too shameful to name, or they assume treatment wouldn't actually change anything. This barrier doesn't look like a dramatic crisis. It looks like quiet, mundane avoidance. Marcus Serklix-Helsley tells that the situation is still manageable. The individual internalizes the shame, building a psychological wall that traps their own internal awareness safely out of sight. Eventually, dependency does produce external behavioral signs, but they are much smaller and slower to appear than expected. The first subtle breaches usually happen at home. Marcus shows increased irritability, particularly when drinking is delayed, and a slight withdrawal from normal family activities. His wife notices these mood shifts, but she reasonably attributes them to routine occupational stress rather than dependency. Among coworkers in solitary industries, the signs are even subtler. A minor shift in how they discuss time off, or a sudden slight defensiveness about casual questions. When family and colleagues miss these early signals, it isn't a failure of attention. It proves exactly how well the high-functioning pattern hides the truth. This slow, quiet progression is exactly why the stakes for this safety-sensitive DOT compliance work are so incredibly high. The critical vulnerability in the system is time. A person can navigate severe internal dependency for a long period before triggering a reasonable suspicion test or a mandatory conversation. Waiting for external signs to become obvious means waiting to intervene during the period when behavioral change is the most difficult. That is why internal awareness is the earliest, most reliable safety signal available. It fires long before any external observer could possibly prompt action. This is where we leave Marcus. He hasn't had an accident, he hasn't failed a test, he still holds the power to protect his life and his career. Possessing that internal awareness gives him the power to make a conscious choice. He doesn't have to let the high-functioning pattern quietly decide for him. Internal awareness is the true front line of workplace safety. What you choose to do with your own awareness is the open question this story leaves you with.